Hello and welcome to our paper making lab. In this first part we're going to show you how to make the paper, and in later steps we're going to show you how to test it. So first let's talk about the items that are needed. You'll need your deckle and your mold. The mold is the flat part and the deckle is the frame. You'll also need a container to be able to dip the water in and mix the paper mixture. This is the hand grinder. You can also use a blender, but the hand grinder works great and grinds up the paper into pulp so that you're able to make nice uniform paper with. You'll need 2 pieces of fabric. Felt works great for this, and also 2 towels that are included in the kit. First, you'll need to shred up your paper. You could either use a conventional shredder or do it by hand. Next, you want to submerge your deckle and your mold into your container and fill it up with water. If you plan on just pouring the pulp directly on the mold, you don't really need much water in it, and you can stop it right below the deckle. Next, take a good amount of the shredded paper that you previously made and place it in the bottom of the bottom piece of the grinder. You want to put a good amount in there. Remember that this paper is going to make an entire sheet of paper, and so just be generous with it. Go ahead and submerge that in water. The water is going to seep through the holes on the bottom of the grinder, and it's just going to start compressing that paper into the bottom of the grinder, so when you place the top piece of the grinder on, all the paper will stay in there. So again, you're just encouraging water to go in the bottom. If you can see that the water is already starting to seep in. You want a good mixture of water to paper, and you can go ahead and start grinding it. There's no wrong amount of time to grind your paper. It really depends on the end properties that you want. If you want paper that has choppier looking pieces in it, then grind it less. If you want a more uniform looking paper, you can grind it more. You can over grind it if you grind it to the point where the fibers are too small to actually stick together, and you'll create weak paper. If you are going for weak paper, it's really not an issue to go ahead and over grind it. Just remember that the grinding process will change the properties of the paper that you make. So just take your time during this part, and you can check on it periodically to see what type of fibers it's going to look like, and you can continue the grinding process if you want to. For this demonstration, we're going to try to make as uniform of paper as possible. As you can see, some of the pulp is already starting to fall out of the grinder, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Whenever we grind this up, we kind of want a cloudy consistency, and so we're going to continue to grind until we achieve that. Here's the grinding process sped up so you can kind of see how long it takes in order to get some really nice consistent paper. Again, periodically check on your fibers to see if they are the consistency that you're looking for. As you can see, the more you grind, the finer your particles and your fibers become. Once you reach the right consistency, just turn your grinder over and drop your fibers into the bottom of your mold, and just use your hands to gently make sure you get a uniform layer. When you pull your mold and deckle up, if you have a uniform layer, your paper will also be uniform. When you're satisfied with how that layer looks, go ahead and very slowly raise it out of the tub. If you look at the texture of your paper, you'll notice that it's quite rough. You could actually leave it at this stage and let it dry, but if you want stronger paper, you can begin to press it. Place a piece of the felt that's included in the kit on top, and if you choose to press the mold while it's in the deckle, do so very carefully so that you don't damage either one. Here we're just trying to get a minimal amount of water out before we remove the mold from the deckle. So again, just press very lightly. You can place all your other items aside and start to get ready for the drying process. lay out your towel that you're going to soak up all the excess water with down, and you can gently press into the mold. Again, be very gentle at this stage and don't put a lot of pressure onto the mold and deckle. You could also take out the mold itself. You don't have to actually press on the mold and deckle if you're afraid of putting too much pressure. Next, remove the mold from the deckle, just being very careful. Make sure you leave that felt piece on top of it. It'll help maintain the integrity of your paper, and you can start pressing your piece in between the towels again. So just continue to turn over your piece and find all the dry areas of the towel and continue to press in a uniform manner. Try not to bend the mold too much and just continue to press out all the water. The more that you press at this stage, the stronger paper you'll have. The force that you actually put onto the fibers help them to better stick together, and therefore you'll have a stronger paper when you're finished. So after pressing for some time, you can start to look at the corners of your paper to see if it's ready to come off of that mold. You'll know when it's ready. It shouldn't be too much trouble to lift it from the corner itself, and just do so very carefully. If you examine the texture of your paper, you'll notice that it's taken on the holes that are created from the actual mold. You can actually leave it at this stage and allow it to dry, or you can go ahead and press out the texture that this has created. Really, there's no wrong way to do it, and it's up to you completely. Just depends on what finished look you want for your paper. In this case, we're just going to sandwich it between another piece of felt. Again, that felt just holds the paper together nicely. It helps to drain off the excess liquid, and it's just an easy fabric to work with. So go ahead and continue pressing here. This is taking out all of that rough surface texture from the mold, and it's also creating strong paper because the fibers are continuing to stick together throughout all this pressing. Once you feel like you've pressed enough, again, there's really no wrong way to do it. You can start to look at your paper. This middle piece, I know all of these are the same color, but this middle piece is actually the paper. You can see a few small pieces of the larger paper that wasn't quite ground enough. So in this stage, we're just going to dry it. We're going to place the paper on the counter. We're going to place the mold on top of it. So what the book is it acts like a weight and just holds the paper down. If you choose not to add a weight, what you'll get is really wavy paper. And if you want wavy paper, that's fine. You can also choose to allow your paper to dry out in open air, and if you get wavy paper, you can simply iron it out. We recommend ironing it between 100% cotton and just use that steam setting on your iron if possible. You can also actually iron your paper while it's wet. You want to use a low heat setting just to make sure that you don't burn your paper, and just run that iron over a few times just to make sure that you get out all of those wrinkles, and you can just examine your paper and iron it to the desired flatness that you want. So that was the paper making process. In the next stages, we're going to inspect the paper, and we're also going to test the force required to puncture it. So the first thing we're going to do is just take various light sources and look at our paper. As you can see, this one's quite uniform throughout. We're just trying to see if there's thicker parts of the paper. That way when we look at our puncture force later, we can kind of figure out why that is. On the darker spots, as you can see here up at the top, the puncture force required is going to be higher than those that are lighter. The light means that there's thinner parts of the paper. Now we're going to get into the puncture force testing of this lab. This apparatus tests the force required to puncture through the paper. So the user simply places the paper at the top here and then pulls down this bottom bar. stretching the rubber bands and applying a force so that it can puncture the paper. And they read the side of it here. The units are in pounds. There are very little calculations in this lab. These have already been conveniently calculated into pounds. So as soon as that punctures the paper, you simply look at the corresponding number and record that value as the force required to puncture the paper. So here's a closer look. You can see that arrow, and that corresponds to the force that it took to puncture the paper. And we'll show a little demonstration of what it looks like as that paper is being punctured. Take the paper that you previously made, and you're going to put it in this top portion right here of the tester. You want to cut your paper into strips. The strip width really doesn't matter. It just needs to fit into this top portion of the tester so that we're able to puncture it. So go ahead and slide that piece in there. As you can see, that little puncture at the top holds it nicely, and just press down until you see a nice pop in the paper. It'll be quite evident once that does that. So right there at that moment, you want to record the force that you see on the side that corresponds to the arrow right where it gets punctured in there. And you want to record this in the lab manual. Here we're just using some of the paper that we made to write down some of the results that we've gotten. We're just labeling the location by number, so puncture 1, puncture 2. In this case it's puncture 1, and the force required to puncture it, we got 2.5 pounds, and we're just going to record that. You can also circle the puncture that you created just to make sure you remember that that one corresponds to number 1. So continue testing your paper 5 times, and then you take an average in your book and just record those answers. And that's it. You guys are done. We really hope that you enjoyed this lab and that you have some interest in paper engineering. Please feel free to reach out to us and just let us know how we're doing. Thanks, and see you guys next time.